Hey, everybody. Welcome to Profiling Evil Live with Mike King. I have a couple of really special guests today. We're not even going to waste time. We're going to get right to bringing the whole crew on. You met a few days ago Pete Gagliardi, retired ATF Senior Supervisory Agent in charge of not only the New York City field office, but worked at headquarters, spent 30 years working for the federal government in alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, served as a congressional liaison, actually an entire congressional liaison across the board on Capitol Hill, has been in charge of law enforcement programming and technology within the ATF. So Pete, welcome aboard. And Lauren Scharf, who you all know from Fox 21, and Lawrence, so awesome to have you join in. We have been having a lot of interesting discussions offline the last couple of days as we've watched things unfolding in the Suzanne Morphew now upcoming series of hearings and murder trial. And I wanted to just jump right into it and talk a little bit about some of the things that you've uncovered happening in Salida about Barry Morphew.
Yeah, Mike, so people continue to tell me things as far as, I'm not in Salida, so I have some eyes and ears there for me. And people are telling me that the condo that Barry used to live is completely cleaned out, and the girls and whoever else helped them moved out of the condo and people cleaned it up. So that's empty.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, Pete, this case kind of got thrown on you in the last couple of days as I've been asking you some questions about gun violence, about the use of weapons in crimes. And frankly, in this particular case, we don't know if that is accurate or not, but we do know that a gun violation is involved in this case. And there's a lot of times organizations, individuals are brought down for violating gun crimes, and maybe they get away with other pieces of the puzzle.
Many times that's the Achilles heel, the gun violation.
Yeah, well, this is kind of one of those examples where that could play out, because a lot of really interesting things have happened. And I thought what would be interesting to do is to talk a little bit about some of the things that have happened in the last couple of days. And I wanted to start with this court document. I mentioned this yesterday, that there has been a substitution of counsel for the defense. And I wanted to bring this up because I actually got one piece of the puzzle wrong yesterday as I was reading a few things. Daniel Zettler actually is the defense, the public defender on the defense side that was relieved of responsibility in this case. And I mentioned yesterday that he was part of the defense team. He used to be part of the defense team. We now have two new lawyers who have taken on Barry Morphew's case, and they are Iris Itan and Drew Nielsen. And Lauren, you've had some dealings with them in the past on other criminal cases. I thought it might be kind of interesting to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Drew Nielsen, I interviewed her after the Crystal Lee Kenny case. She represented Crystal Lee Kenny. Crystal Lee Kenny was a part of the Patrick Frazee murder trial that happened almost a year ago, where, you can go back and watch some of my reports from that. But she was a key witness in that trial. She told investigators that she helped clean up the murder scene, and she actually, for her testimony, got a plea deal. And so Drew Nielsen was her counsel, and Drew Nielsen also helped her even get out of jail time early because of some stipulations with some of the what's the word I'm looking for? Some verbiage of that.
Yeah, in fact, that's actually a pretty interesting story and something that we really need to focus on. And I think the prosecution learned a lesson through that too, because if I remember that case correctly, what happened was there was a 36-month sentence handed down, but because the prosecution didn't cross a few T's and dot some I's, it left an appeal and an opportunity to challenge that. She actually got that time cut down to like 18 months. Is that?
Yeah, 18 months. Yeah. So
Yeah.
she's already out. Crystal Lee Kenny is now out of prison. And then I know the other attorney, she has covered over 50. She's brought 50 cases to trial. They also both as a team has acquitted a case as well. And I have more information on our website, my station's website, Fox 21 News, if you want to look into more of those lawyers.
That'd be great. And folks, if you're not following Lauren on her YouTube channel, please make sure that you're subscribing there and keeping up on things. Pete and his buddy Ray also have a new YouTube channel, In the Chill of the Night. And Pete, we gotta make sure that people are looking at that. It really is a fun channel in the way that you're doing things. But here's something that I thought was kind of interesting. If we think about this prosecution team that now has stepped in, you got to look at the prosecution, and the prosecution is led by Jeff Lindsay, and Jeffrey Lindsay is an experienced prosecutor, has like 25 to 30 years in Colorado that he's been practicing. In fact, I listened to some of Scott Reich last night, and I think he mentioned that just even looking at his bar number, you could tell that he's been in the business for about 30 years, which is really good for the state and for challenges like we saw that resulted in that reduced sentence. Hopefully Linda Stanley, an elected position, but this prosecutor has just come in with gusto, and I'm really thrilled about that. But they're up against a team that's not inexperienced.
Yeah, they definitely have a lot of years, and it seems like they work together really well. And for him to hire both of them, that's Yeah.
So bottom line is Barry Morphew's had to pay I would assume, unless it's all pro bono, and I haven't heard anything to suggest that, probably had to pay a bucket of money in order to get these two secured to do the defense. I guess it's good he sold his house and has a GoFundMe page and all kinds of stuff to help cover some of those expenses. It is going to be and could financially wipe out whatever that money is there to defend on a capital murder case. That's a big deal. I want to just mention to all of our mods who have jumped in to take over and all the folks coming in, thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank you for those super chats. It's really nice to have your support, and I really appreciate it. Now, I wanted to go back, Lauren, a little bit to this information from the complaint that was filed. And again, I think this was just fantastic. When you think about the fact that we've been kind of put in the penalty box while we wait for the court to decide on the arrest affidavit, the district attorney was able to put out the charging document, and that was made public before the defense had an opportunity to quash that. I think it was great because we saw, again, and I don't want to go through these in detail, folks. You can go in and look in my remarks from yesterday where we went into detail, but it lays out the 5 counts that are in this particular information, which is murder in the first degree, tampering with a deceased human body, and tampering with physical evidence. And those are listed May 9 through March 4. I don't know, Lauren, Pete, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
That was around, I think March 4th was around the time when Barry Morphew sold that Puma Path house. So I think it's interesting that that's kind of the cutoff point of those charges. I think it's also interesting that I believe that he changed his counsel before these 5 counts were filed. So those 2 attorneys that he hired weren't aware at the time of these 2 additional charges.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. Well, and it's interesting to think if you go back, the murder charge and the tampering with a deceased human body, that is a really tight time frame. May 9th to May 10th of 2020, 2 days. The day before Mother's Day and Mother's Day. Then I think you bring out a really interesting point there, Lauren, and that is that the physical evidence tampering extends for the entire duration of the last year when law enforcement was trying to get information. I suspect what it means is they have a whole lot of interviews where they can impeach or believe they can impeach Barry on testimony or things that he did to divert attention from one place to another. I don't know, Pete, salty old cop with 30 years. What are your thoughts when you see some of these charges rolling out?
Well, what they tell me is, I mean, these are the allegations, and all it does is give me the thirst to know what the evidence is behind and the details are. So other than okay, this is what's alleged. I really can't connect any more dots than that.
Yeah, well, the one I really wanted to talk to you about, because you dealt with it for 30 years, was the purported weapons violation here. And I want to just get this a little easier to see. But there was a report that I saw that was a little bit wild from my perspective. One news agency reported that the weapons charge included something to do with a firearm silencer, meaning any instrument, attachment to the weapon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't believe there is any evidence that's been discussed to suggest that this firearm was used in a crime, had a silencer on it. And again, I'm just speculating based on what my gut tells me. But Pete, this is the thing that really has been causing a lot of questions in the public the last couple of days. People wanting to know what on earth is a short rifle and who cares and why do we care?
Well, first of all, this issue of the silencer, I think that if there was a silencer is mentioned as in the definition of a dangerous weapon in Colorado, but since they've included the other definition of a dangerous weapon, a short rifle, I think if there was a silencer, they would have charged that too in the charging document. So I'm comfortable speaking about a short rifle. That's what's in the document, and it's a rifle having a barrel less than 16 inches in long or in length, or an overall length less than 26 inches. And this definition in the state law, it mirrors the definition of a short barrel rifle or a weapon made from a rifle in the federal law, the National Firearms Act of 1934. The measurements are the same, and they stem from a historical perspective. During Prohibition, in the gang wars of Prohibition, these were looked at as gangster type weapons. And the reason the measurements are significant is because they were looked at as measurements that would make it very easy to conceal a rifle or a shotgun under a man's or a woman's coat. And that's why we have these measurements that have become the standard in both the federal law and I see now the state law in Colorado.
Yeah, Lauren, I don't know if you have some questions on this, but Pete, why would a state choose to create a similar mirror law to a federal law?
I think that, well, look, there's like 3,000 ATF agents to go across the country, and there's like 800,000 law enforcement officers.
Yeah, 876,000 or something.
Exactly. So I think the state wants to give itself some independence and flexibility to act. But when I read the statute, the state statute, it's an affirmative defense if a peace officer or a member of the armed forces or Colorado National Guard is carrying this weapon as part of their official duties, and the last line of that paragraph says, it's that said, a person that has a valid permit and license for possession of such weapon. Now, under the federal law, you can own a short barrel rifle, but you have to register it with the ATF under the National Firearms Act. You have to pay a $200 transfer tax. You have to submit fingerprints. You have to go through a number of steps. And unless you do that, and you're in possession of an unregistered short rifle, let's say. So if you did have all the proper paperwork, I would suspect in reading this, now I'm not an attorney, but I've dealt with these firearms laws my whole career. I would suspect that if it was registered by the federal government, that would be considered a license or a permit, if you would. I don't know if there is such a facility in Colorado, state law, to have that done. I'm not a resident of Colorado, so I'm not familiar with the entire Colorado law.
Yeah. Lauren, I'm sure you have some questions in this gun, regard to this gun, but Chippy Hick is asking, is it illegal for Barry Morphew to use the GoFundMe money to help in his defense? I don't know the answer to that. I think that it is certainly, if it ever was used for that, is an area where the public could go back to GoFundMe and say, that wasn't what I signed up for, because the descriptor of how those funds were going to be used in the GoFundMe were pretty specific, that they were for finding Suzanne, paying for those who helped. But that was an interesting question. But Lauren, you got some questions for Pete?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask me, does this mean the possession of a dangerous weapon? Does this mean that law enforcement investigators have the weapon? And I don't know if you can tell us that or not. Is that they have to have an actual physical gun to have these charges?
Well, there's two questions in that one question. Do you always have to have the physical gun? Not necessarily, but I would think that in reading this charging document, and they have some evidence that he was in possession of this rifle. Now, could it be some photographs and some discharged evidence from maybe doing target practice that would link the two? Or I would think that most likely they have a rifle in custody. That would be my guess, but it's not necessarily perhaps that you'd have to have the rifle, but you would need some evidence of possession of that rifle. Photographs, a witness statement, maybe some discharged evidence to say, well, here, I watched him fire this short-barreled rifle, I measured it or whatever, and I have the fired ammunition components, bullets or cartridge cases from that. But those are big jumps. The easiest thing, the most simple explanation is that they executed a search warrant and they seized a short rifle. That's that. If I was a doctor looking at the simplest thing, when somebody turns up in my office with a runny nose, I'd say they have a cold. So I think they have a rifle.
Okay. And another thing that people are asking me is this the murder weapon? And it's like, we don't know yet. We can't say a definitive yes or no.
I don't know what the cause of death is. I don't know what evidence they have to determine that cause of death. But if there was a bullet, maybe they could link it to this rifle. But I have no clue on what the evidence nor cause of death was.
You think about just the mentality, the behavior of gun enthusiasts. This is a guy who has hunted all of his life. And oftentimes you see folks that are real gun enthusiasts wanting to get something like this. I mean, it might be a absolutely innocent purchase, but it's an illegal purchase. You can't even buy this online at that short of a barrel, can you, Pete?
Well, well, today, if 10 years ago I might have said no, but today the industry adapts, and they're making all types of firearms today that they'll put in what they call an arm brace on a pistol. So now they've made a pistol with an arm brace, and frankly, the arm brace looks a little bit like a stock. So it could be a weapon made from a pistol, but it's hard to tell today. There's so many twists and turns with ghost guns and homemade guns and everything else. But generally, when I read something like this, a short rifle, I'm thinking that maybe there was a long rifle that was cut down and it fit the definition and turned into the illegal definition.
For the person who, well, I guess you'd have to go back to 1939 if I remember right. But for the person who has a short rifle that they inherited from granddad or somebody else, and they're all of a sudden looking at the fact that, holy cow, I'm breaking a state and federal law. Is there a process to get that thing turned in and not be responsible if you had one of those sitting around in the family gun safe?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of processes. One, if it was an official bequeath where it was passed down, there's a process for that. And if it's simply illegal, granddad had made an illegal rifle or sawed-off shotgun. If it's simply illegal and you wind up cleaning granddad's house and you have it, you call your local ATF office and they can take it at what they call an abandonment of property. No harm, no foul. You just turn it over and they'll destroy it. But so there are two processes, one for an official bequeathment and one for if you're just caught with an unregistered, because once it's unregistered, it can't be registered again. So now if granddad had a registered one, there's a process for that. But if it's never been registered, it can never be registered. Your only alternative is call ATF, surrender it, and everybody will live happily ever after.
It's an absolutely worthless weapon. I mean, the accuracy on a short rifle it's not something for sport shooting or hunting. Why were they made in the first place? You kind of already tipped your hand on that earlier on.
Well, originally they were cut down for concealment purposes. And now today, I mean, one might imagine that you mentioned the person was a hunter or whatever. Maybe that they wanted something where they could keep in a car or in the back of an ATV or something, because they're in the woods all the time and they worried about a bear or whatever. But they don't have the ability to carry something long back there. So, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons they do it. Some people do it just to do it, just to have this. But without getting into their head and interviewing and find out what happened, I'm just guessing.
Yeah. Lauren?
Well, I want to know, so it's not accurate? Like when someone shoots a short rifle, it's not very accurate?
Well, the purpose of a rifle is the barrel is very long and the bullet spins longer as it moves through the barrel. It has a more accurate trajectory and everything else. And you're sort of limiting the benefits of a rifle and turning it into a pistol, if you would, the more you shorten the barrel. That's why people use rifles to go hunting, where they have to fire at long distances, where a pistol, all of the gases are going to be out of that barrel within 6-7 inches. Whereas a rifle, you've got 30 inches, where there's more power behind that round. The gas, and that's the benefit of a rifle over a pistol. They're made for the long shot, not the short shot.
Now, you may never have this chance again, Lauren. Pete is known globally, has consulted with law enforcement agencies all around the world, probably is one of the most brilliant and brightest minds when it comes to weapons and weapon violations. I mean, Pete, the fact that you just jump on today, is really appreciated. And I don't know, Lauren, this is your chance. Any other questions in the gun world? Because this is the guy.
So a short rifle, you were talking a little bit about how you can't register it because it's really illegal, right?
If once you've made it and you haven't gotten permission to manufacture, now I'm speaking on the ATF federal law side. Once you make one of these NFA weapons, before you get permission to make it, and so you haven't been authorized to make it, you once it's unregistered and it's done, it can't be registered again.
Okay.
So if you want to manufacture an NFA weapon, you have to apply to do it first. You have to pay the tax. You have to be approved. And if you don't, and you make it, you can't go back over the bridge. You burned that bridge.
And because, Barry has a history of hunting, there was no need for him to have this, right?
Probably not a need, but maybe because he was very familiar with guns, he had an interest in guns. I mean, again, I would want to interview him if I was working at ATF still and find out exactly why, if he would talk to us, why he did what he did. If he did it at all. He might have gotten it from someone else, and who knows? And for what purpose, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's a great reminder. These are allegations made by the state right now, and until he's proven guilty, he's not guilty of doing these things, only of being charged with those. I think if we go back and look at some of the affidavit information and the charging document that we saw, I wanted to also just remind everybody that last week he had 2 additional charges, a forgery charge and a ballot violation where he, while his wife was missing and reported missing, he forged her ballot, entered a vote in the presidential election, and that led to later being questioned by FBI and confessing that he lied about it and voted in her name because he wanted a particular candidate to win. So in reality, he's got a batch of felony charges. The one that we really are most concerned about is if, in fact, they are able to prove that there was a homicide and that he was responsible for it. But he likely could be hammered just as hard on a weapons violation, forgery charge, and other things too. So you got to hand it to this DA that they are continuing to investigate this case, and they're continuing to roll out charges as they learn more about it. And folks, if anyone out there knows something about this case, reach out to the Chaffee County Sheriff's Office and the district attorney and let them know what you know so that this case can be brought to fruition. And frankly, if it's information that would suggest that he's not responsible as he has been charged, that should be known too, because it's about the truth. That's really what we're concerned about. Lauren, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I released a little bit more of my interview last night with Fox 21, and just listening back to my 1.5, 2-hour interview that I did back in September with Barry. He threw out every scenario you could think of when it comes to what happened to his wife. And you can go back and watch some of that on fox21news.com. But it's interesting to now see charges and then to go back and listen to that interview to hear some of that and to put correlation to what now he faces, and he's behind bars. It's interesting.
Yeah. Pete, if you were still in charge of a field office, what would you want to be doing right now to support local law enforcement and move this thing forward?
Well, I think I would have asked one of my agents to touch base with the sheriff's office or whomever seized this firearm, if there is a firearm, and see if we could be of any assistance. One thing ATF would do right off the bat is to see if this firearm was in fact registered, and therein lies a bit of a conflict, because the disclosure of the registration status and the tax paid status is prohibited. It can't be disclosed. An ATF agent can't disclose it to someone else that's not another member of ATF or the federal government. But having said that, we could be of assistance. And on the ATF side, on the federal side, the felony is a 10-year felony. And it could be a 10-year felony for the making, a 10-year felony for the possession, a 10-year felony for the failure to pay the tax. So they add up. So when you're dealing with NFA type weapons and violations, and you're charging people under the federal side, you've got a lot of leverage in terms of developing a cooperating witness or getting a plea agreement.
Yeah. Well, to both of you, thank you. I'm going to ask you just to hang around for a moment. And I want, if you have a question, folks, for Pete or for Lauren or for me, please put them in. We'll watch the chat for a moment. And if the two of you would also watch the chat, if you see something that you want to respond to, let's do that. I will put out a plea to you. If you're not subscribed to Profiling Evil, would you please do so? Please look at Lauren's YouTube channel, subscribe to her YouTube channel, and please go over to In the Chill of the Night and look at Pete and Ray and subscribe there. If you're bored, this week they launched a podcast that I appeared on with Pete and Ray called The RF Factor. It's actually been out for some time, but I had an opportunity to interview on that. Pete, do you want to talk about the RF Factor for 10 seconds and plug that?
The RF Factor, relentless follow-up, is a key element of leadership, that you just don't give out an order. You relentlessly follow up and make sure that it's been pursued.
There you go. Well, please make sure you go over there and make sure you hit Profiling Evil's podcast today. If you noticed yesterday, I was on with Vanessa at Unmasked talking about the Love Has Won cult. We were talking about cult dynamics. Really interesting conversation, because members of the Love Has Won cult actually came into the chat room and shared a lot of feelings. And a former father god of the cult came onto the show with us to talk a little bit about some of the ideology of the organization. I also want to let you know that Suzanne Morphew's family has been texting back and forth with me, and to both Pete and Lauren. Thomas says they are just so grateful for, especially Lauren, your tireless investigation, and Pete for clarifying the short rifle laws, because the family has been concerned once that came out yesterday. And we'll get Thomas and family back on when it's appropriate, but they are listening in. So make sure you're shouting out to the family how much you love them and think of them, and how you're praying for them. So a couple of things that just cracked me up. I got to put up, Ash 123 says the mountain lion deserves an apology. Pete, if you didn't know, one of the potential ways in which Suzanne disappeared, according to the defendant, was that a mountain lion took her down and carried her off. So that's good. I hope that apology gets through, since there was never any evidence to support that particular one. But anyway,
Barry still told me that in September and August that he, thought possibly a mountain lion could have taken her. So.
Well, there you go. And folks, if you haven't gone back to our channel and looked at, we have over 25 videos that we've done on this case in the last year. One was dedicated specifically to the mountain lion theory, Pete. We actually went out and got a couple of biologists from the Mountain Lion Foundation, and I just couldn't stand it any longer. This idea that a mountain lion did this, coming from mountain lion country. And we were able to just talk about how mountain lions create a pretty ugly scene when they kill something. So anyway, so to all of you, thank you. And to the two of you especially, thank you for taking time to jump on today. Let's get together in a few days and see as more information comes out. Pete, I'd love a deeper dive into the weapons violations as we see what the actual weapon is. And I think knowing public, it'll leak out before long. So we'll take a look at that. And Lauren, as always, continue to dig up and tell us when it's important to jump on to Fox 21 to listen to you, and to both of you. Thank you so much. Any last words, Pete?
Nope. Thank you for having me. And Lauren, it's a pleasure to meet you. And hello, everyone, all the listeners out there. Remember, RF Factor and In the Chill of the Night podcast.
There you go, Lauren.
Nice to meet you, Pete. And I just want to say I plan on being at the next hearing for Barry Morphew. So just follow me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I'll be posting some new videos on YouTube about this case. So just stay tuned.
Thank you. And folks, if you found this helpful, would you please crush that like button down there, give us a thumbs up, and please subscribe to Profiling Evil. If you're interested in getting more information, you can always go to profilingevil.com and sign up for the B.O.L.O. And for all of your support in all of the different ways that you do it, we send our thanks and appreciation, and have a great day. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Pete.
Bye now.